ad hoc intent systems being built up, and they've made great use of intents. What other use cases are there for intents? And that's something that we're actively exploring, right? You don't necessarily need a general purpose intent system if there are no other use cases that people want. You can run order book mechanisms, price them off-chain, register the prices on-chain, and use that as a signal that's ultimately being generated on the chain. And I have a view that the central exchanges will actually want to ultimately participate in a system like this, but that's probably like a 2-year from now question.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Ship the Code from RockAwake's Labs. Thanks for tuning back into the Bare Metal Podcast. Today I've got here with me Chris Hockenbrocht from Specular. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. How's it going today?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
Doing all right, actually. I'm just, I'm feeling great because I just recovered from a little bit of flu. So I would say things are looking up. So
what's with all the equipment behind you?
My hobby is a little bit crazy. I probably have a lot, like 3-4 times as much equipment as this, but I love music. Back when I was in high school growing up, I thought I would be a professional musician. So I was practicing 6 hours a day on a saxophone. Once I got to the end of my high school career, though, I realized that most jazz musicians in New York play 3 to 4 gigs a night. They make a couple $100 a night. It's you don't get gigs every night. You've got to deal with that. You can be the best musician in the world and not get paid for it or not get much recognition for it. And so it came down to this idea that I had skills that were that other people did not. I'm very technical, so I could get in. I've been hacking at computers since I was very young.
I'm very curious about how you get from saxophone to Specular. So, do put some flesh on that because that sounds like an exciting pivot. That's what I'd call it, startup pivot.
Well, I don't know. I mean, startups are kind of my entire backstory here. So before this, we can start out in university here. I was studying fully homomorphic encryption. I was watching the rise of Ethereum smart contracts with Serpent, which maybe some of the listeners are familiar with, but this is really dating me. Wrote like a really not great paper in trust mechanisms back in the day when, thinking about complex smart contract interactions was a little bit of just not a reality for people. And then I jumped ship from that because I realized fully homomorphic encryption was at that point in 2014 hard to commercialize. So I met someone studying differential privacy, another cryptographic subject. Founded Leap Year around that. Served as the CTO and co-founder of that startup for about 7 years, a little bit over 7 years, and then beginning of last year, around February, that was acquired by Snowflake. And they were building on a data marketplace as a fantastic match made in heaven. They already had all the customers that we were looking to acquire. So it's just like, we can get access to them through Snowflake and it's a win-win. So did that, was very curious to go into a few other explorations and do another startup. So looked at AI for a while. Frustrated with cost structures there. I think things will get better. I think that there's a lot of innovations that
AI startups are a vehicle for transfer of money from VCs to NVIDIA, right?
That's you're referring to. When you look at the macro scale of how much has been invested in AI, I forget the last number, and this might be old, is like $200 billion piled into AI. Like, are we going to see that upside? Or is like 200 billion going to be the upside?
All of it's coming.
No one breaks even. Don't worry. Yeah. So we'll see,
I mean, the way you're exposed to the upside there is to buy that NVIDIA stock, right? Not financial advice, by the way. I don't have it.
No, it's to buy nuclear power, actually, right now.
Right, yeah.
That's what Sam
Mark
Altman's
wants
doing.
to have that 1 gigawatt DC, right? Yeah. So I'm interested, Chris, how did you come to found Specular, and, tell us what Specular is.
Well, that's also a long story. I'm horrible at making long stories short, but I came in a little bit. I'm like the third co-founder, the missing like beetle maybe. Specular was started as an academic project under Dan Song by Ujval Mishra and Jia Ye. And they were looking at decentralization within the rollup space. I mean, we all know there's centralized sequencers today, but there's also a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, a huge problem with um, even centralization of the validation. And they were looking into how to solve for some of these problems. So I came in to help help with execution, help bring this to life. We got to a point where we got the validation working in a way that we wanted. We have, and there's a paper that is out that's been published and peer reviewed on that. The thing that we came to was that this might not be the most competitive thing in the space, right? Especially if you go towards decentralized sequencing. The reason being that you introduce MEV into a rollup, which, I mean, like, if you're going to compete with every other rollup out there, you've got a very big pitfall in that you're subjecting your users to MEV. So, we look for a solution for that, and we found Intents as a very nice way of doing things. And it turned out that as we got more and more into Intents, that Intents really do foundationally reshape some things. I think that they're I think that they'll win. I don't know that Specular will win in the Intents game, but I think Intents are the right pattern here, and it will breed a lot of efficiencies for the market overall.
So before we get into Intents, can you just sort of summarize, okay, what Specular is? What are you guys building in the protocol? Just give us a high-level overview. Then I'd love to get into Intents and how you guys understand it and how it plugs into the project. But let's first define sort of Specular. So you guys have a GitHub repo and that contains code for what kinds of artifacts, what kinds of things?
Yeah, so Specular is a cross-chain Intents orchestration layer. And I'll have to break that down a little bit. But at its core, it is a rollup. We don't want people to put TVL on here. We don't want necessarily a whole lot of things. This isn't where the funds live. This isn't where most of anything lives. Its sole purpose is to coordinate the execution of Intents cross-chain. And so it is a mechanism for adding additional consensus rules in the process of executing constraints. So what you'll find there is you'll find a basic rollup built on the op stack, and the code for our Intents part is not quite in there, but you'll find contracts and some other modifications to Geth that support Intents and intent validation on chain.
So the rollup is intended to be run by a set of validators from the get-go. Is that right?
Yeah. We're already working on pulling our validators together as we're moving into the testnet here. It will be run with validators. We'll be, at least at this outset, running a central sequencer. It's important for us to move towards decentralized sequencing, but a lot of our exploration that we want to do is focused on applications and exploring novel uses for intents in applications. And so optimization of solutions and block building within the testnet is not the most essential component here. But as we move forward, we're gonna implement an auction, do a decentralized block building process for the network, and allow the auction to dictate the construction of solutions for the network. Or really, honestly, other networks. I mean, again, these are being executed cross-chain.
So let's dig a little bit more into intents. So how do you understand intents? Why do you think they're relevant? And you said earlier you think they're the right way to build things and the right pattern. Let's sort of dig into your view on intents and then how that plugs into Specular.
Yeah, so intents are really cool. That's not a very informative statement there, but intents are a method of order flow construction. So I want to back up and set some context here. We've always had MEV as a little bit of, I wouldn't have called it a problem at the outset, but when transaction fees were the primary way of obtaining MEV on, say, Bitcoin, They weren't the worst thing, right? This is prioritization of how the market on how much someone's willing to pay for something to get constructed. Now, when we got to proof of stake, this at least made the way that we handle MEV today a little bit more conceivable. But the builders don't have any incentive alignment towards what the users actually want. And this allows them to reorder and restructure the transaction flow to create optimal transaction flow for themselves. So intents, aside from how they're implemented, and I think that there's two paths that we can go down there, but intents are a mechanism for aligning the builders in some sense and the user's desires. Now, again, on that two paths, there's two ways of conceiving this. There's a very on-chain method, and there's an off-chain method. I'm not convinced that this is the right dichotomy here, but the on-chain method will handle everything on-chain. You can look at like Uniswap. That's a good example of something that I consider all on-chain. Uniswap X. Across is also similarly all on-chain. CalSwap is a little bit different. It's an example of what I would call the off-chain method. And the difference here is that where is the order flow constructed for the fulfillment of intents? The order flow in off-chain is literally to construct an order flow that's valid, that gets submitted to the network, that gets built as a block, and that fulfills the necessary state constraints that an intent is asking for. In the on-chain method, you don't really necessarily directly construct order flow. You're interacting with the contract and fulfilling things through that way. And I think the drawback there is there's a little bit less flexibility in terms of your method for construction. And secondarily, you're still inhibited by a lot of contract interactions, which, I mean, when you get to rollups, will be quite a bit cheaper than, say, L1, but still incur more costs than structuring things as direct EOA to EOA transactions that are an operational possibility for when you do this off-chain sort of construction of intents.
When you said, I want to, one of the things you said was it's that the intents are a way for the builder and the user to align. Mm-hmm. It feels to me that only happens under some constructions and some implementations, like in the sense that, for example, let's take, swapping a token and existing in the construction. If I ask for a certain max amount of slippage and there's a mevbot active, I'm going to get exactly that slippage, right? I'm not getting less than that. There's no competition to sort of give me the best execution price. I'll get the worst execution price, and that value is going to be transferred to the block proposer and to the builder that built the block, right? It feels to me like intents align, the builder and me, if there is like a market. So many searchers or many players can submit bids on how they're going to execute my intent, and I get to pick the best one, and then I get sort of like the best price. Do you think differently, or how are you guys thinking about the execution aspect or the implementation of these of intent?
Yeah, this is why decentralized block building and the auction process is very foundational to this, right? To your point, like you can specify constraints, and if you have the additional consensus rules to enforce those constraints somehow, whether that's through contracts or other means, you end up in a world where you're at least meeting what you wanted. Actually, I would say that's kind of good enough in some sense, and I don't want to say that we can't do better. Like clearly the idea of intents is doing better, but even just starting here, if your price is met, right, like from a basic trade perspective, right, like I am trading asset 1 for asset 2, if I am meeting my specified price, then I'm getting something I desire more than what I'm holding on to. So in that basic sort of economic sense, like it is a positive sum game, and the trade, the searcher is or solver is also making out, right, because they have this opportunity. Now when we get to auctions, we get to start to think about optimization, which is really important. And there,
And just
we
as an
then
example,
have
by
to
the way, of
implement some
this,
sort of
like I feel
utility
this every
scoring
day
method. And there's a
in
great outline
when I'm trying to
in a
swap.
blog post. Yeah, for a swap is like, let's just stick to this example, but for this, right, like there's a utility function, like how much better does a solution do than what the prices asked therein actually or how much better are the prices that I'm fulfilling at than what the users requested. And one detail here I need to highlight is that when a solver solves, they're not generally solving for a single intent. They're usually solving for a subset of intents within an auction. That doesn't have to be the case. RFQ systems exist. A lot of bridging was built around RFQs, so you don't have to do that. But in a lot of the current solving systems, they're proposing solutions which are a batch of intents being fulfilled at once. And so, you will, as an auction or within the auction as a solver, try to optimize this as best as you can. Now, this is still, I will claim that this is incentive compatible. I am open to people contradicting me because I'm making a really loose point here. But if the users are getting their price point and they're revealing their price preferences honestly, then if they are being fulfilled, they're getting an outcome that they want. If their prices don't meet what the market has, then they're not being fulfilled, and they're actually better off because they didn't meet their price point, right? Like if they had met their price point, they would be better off. But had they not met that, it's not an acceptable deal to them. And then the
Let me
solvers
sort of
too.
give you my mental model of what I do when I'm swapping, right? So
Sure.
just like to dig into this a little bit deeper. I'll set a max slippage. I'll say I want asset A for my asset B, and I'll set a maximum slippage. And the reason, and I set it a little bit higher than what I would like, right? I'm willing to accept it. Under the assumption that, if I get unlucky and there's a swap before me that's uninformed flow, I'm willing to accept this worst price in favor of me trying to repeat this transaction, however many times. But like, I'm hoping that won't happen. And like if this is random, right, I'll usually get a better execution price than that. And there's no mevbot active. The thing is, if there is an active party on the other side, it's an adversarial environment, right? And I will always get that worst price. But I'm not happy with getting it every time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but to my point here, like if you did request a tighter slippage bound and it couldn't be provided, then it wouldn't be fulfilled, right? And so like the market wasn't able to satisfy your desires. Maybe your desires are wrong.
Yeah, I
but
mean, maybe it's it's too much to ask of the market. What I'm saying is, like, if you try to get into the mind of the user, then just setting that price might not be the best way to capture their preference. But I guess it's what we have, right? I mean, I haven't heard of anybody else trying to come up with other ways to capture this intent. I don't know if anything else would fly, but it's still sort of vaguely unsatisfying to me to just be able to like set this sort of worst execution price. But I see your point, and I mean, mathematically this is very attractive, and it's much easier from an engineering perspective to work with.
well, I wouldn't say it's much easier. It should make application development much easier, though, and it's a big win. But for this is adding to the complexity of the ecosystem, I would say overall. But it's a major win because the different abstractions that it reveals to different players, especially users and applications, allow for a lot more flexibility.
Right. So, okay, we dug into a sort of point about tokens, but if we step, back up and go a couple of steps back on the stack level, have we captured your view of intents, or is there anything else you'd sort of give us context before we get into how Specular approaches the working with intents?
I mean, I've been so locked up in an ivory tower thinking about intents for a while. I hope I'm not being blind here, but I think we've got it covered.
So let's get into, why you guys are building Specular as you're building it. Like there are other projects focusing on intent. Some of them very specialized, like say, Uniswap X is on token swapping, major use case, but very narrow scope. Then there are projects like those by Orb Labs who want to build an entirely intent-based wallet. That's going to be, this whatever on the other side. I can do any active actions that I can call in my wallet will be somehow executed on some applicable chain picked by a solver, which is to me on the other end of the spectrum, where the abstraction goes all the way to no chain, maybe just tokens. Where does Specular live on this sort of spectrum, and why do you guys pick this realization?
There's a sort of breakdown about in the intent space, and I think there's a motion towards generality, and we'll kind of I'll paint that picture here. So we have intents. Actually, we've had a general purpose intent system in Anoma for almost 3 years now. So that's pretty cool. I don't think anyone's made use of it, and I'll get to my thoughts on why that is. But what we have seen a lot more recently in the last year or two is ad hoc intent systems being built up, like Uniswap, as you noted, or CalSwap, and they've made great use of intents. A lot of not the majority of yet, but a lot of the order flow is going through DeFi order flow is going through these systems today. So I mean, one basic question jumping to generality is what other use cases are there for intents, and that's something that we're actively exploring, right? Like, you don't necessarily need a general purpose intent system if there are no other use cases that people want. Then it's just I'd hate to be blunt and matter of fact there. I would love to see some cool like general purpose system, but it seems like a lot of the major applications are around DeFi. Now the thing is, as I've thought about this a lot, I think there are some really great use cases around this. Things that to me, one of the ecosystem shifts that would happen with intents is actually a reduction, not a complete obliteration or like a removal of oracles, but definitely a lower dependency on oracles, because you can do some interesting things about like running something that looks a little bit closer to well, you can run order book mechanisms, price them off chain, register the prices on chain, and use that as a signal that's ultimately being generated on the chain. And I have a view that the central exchanges will actually want to ultimately participate in a system like this, but that's probably like a 2 year from now question. But these application specific intent systems have done very well. They're ad hoc. They have some drawbacks I think that can be made a little bit better with a holistic system. The general purpose intent systems are going full force into the question of like, can we make everything and design everything around intents? I'm not convinced that that's the right approach. I think that the on-chain logic, some of the on-chain logic that we have today, just can't be done away with. It's a very big unknown is how I'd categorize it, and it's a big question, a big hill to climb or mountain to climb to make those known, in my opinion. But we are trying to sit somewhere in the middle. We want to have a system where applications can be built on top of this. Some of these new ideas around how to restructure existing financial products for an intent-based world, we're going to build into this. And mostly as a demonstration for other people, because we want other people to be thinking about novel applications and making even more optimal implementations of these financial products. But we want to open that up. I think that there's a big problem, and this is something that the general purpose systems do solve for. But there's a big problem in that if I wanted to replicate CalSwap today, or I wanted to replicate Uniswap X, I have to implement all of the complexity, the infrastructure that they've done, especially on the CalSwap side. They have like an auctioneer function and their own kind of mempool for intents. And secondarily, and I think this is maybe even the bigger problem, is putting a solver network together. And not everyone can replicate.
Possibly even harder than spinning up validators, right? Because solvers, that's still an unknown. You don't have a pool of people who've done validation elsewhere.
Yeah,
Gotta
it's
be tough.
the solver space is small. I think it really deserves some focus on growth because it's a very interesting space and there's some cool things that can happen for solvers. But right now, yeah, it just doesn't exist, and you're going to be fighting over the same set of solvers when you are trying to launch your app-specific intent system. And so we imagine that there's the room for a somewhat general purpose intent system here, where we can provide a set of constraints that are semantically well understood, that allow solvers to do their job pretty easily, that can be made use of in the applications. And then any application can use this, and now solvers have access to, across all of these applications, to the same set of constraints that they can work to build this. So maybe someone's doing swaps or some complicated swap related product, and maybe someone's doing like collateralized loans, and it's all in the same intent system, and the solvers are working against all these. And so I think that's the real win here, is that we're starting to unify the marketplace a little bit better, and provide for some of the pitfalls that have been seen in some of the ad hoc examples. I think account abstractions are a really important component here too, because it provides some mechanism of delegation, and it provides actually a much more straightforward pattern for user interaction. There's still some things that are a little bit crufty feeling with some of the ad hoc systems. So yeah, this is kind of the vision here, is not to solve everything, not to be general purpose, but to be an infrastructure for applications to be able to do this. And if there's something we don't support, especially as we're launching our test chain soon for this specific purpose, but we want to know what we don't support and what applications want to do, and how do we actually add the additional things to support that. One of the great things about running an intent system as well is that you can nuke it, because it's about an active participation in the order flow construction. So once the order flow has been constructed, like you don't really need a record, just as long as everyone's agreed that it's been fulfilled correctly at some point.
So I guess we're getting sort of more into the ecosystem side of things, and I'm definitely interested in how you guys are spinning up. But I guess number one, before we get into the the different stakeholders and how you guys are sort of building that out, how are you trying to attract people to your project? What are the USPs you were quoting when you're discussing Specular with other players?
Well, I'm right now I'm actually running a very focused strategy. So I'm not actually blasting anything out right now. More curious, actually. I think that there's some major inhibitions to doing so. So I'm working with people who kind of understand this and have targeted and got connected with applications who have some semblance of this, and like what can be done with the power of intents, to explore this. Because what I would like to do to go to that scattershot process is to have example applications out there. I want to build like a very basic, like no bells and whistles sort of cal swap out there, just to show you, well, if you wanted to build something along this path and add a bunch of other features, here's how you do it. Just here's a starting place to do that. I want to have some examples out there so that people can understand, like, this is the pattern for programming an intent-based application, because it does change things. Like, in the simplest of cases, you actually don't need to do anything on chain, because your intent is like a one and done intent, right? Like, I publish as a user what I want as an intent, and it gets fulfilled, and states it's terminated after that. Now, like a partial batch order, that's something that has a multi-state thing. Like it can be fulfilled in multiple rounds, and so this is where you start to get to on-chain development. But the thing about it is keeping the state transitions between the individual points of fulfillment consistent, and that's one of the ways in which applications will be, I would say, refocused or re-engineered from where they are today. It's a lot more about state management than anything else. But to the point here, like backing up, we're not really. I do want applications who are interested to come. Please come and reach out to us and see if we can do something. We've got some great ideas on some of the patterns that need to be done for some of the financial instruments that we're targeting. We'd love to hear other thoughts, and if you're really set on the intent space, we'll make you successful in this. But until I have a lot of material to educate the rest of the world, I want to hold off on a scattershot approach.
Right. So the focus is on sort of prototyping and attracting early adopters who are already sort of aligned with the space, who are focused on this, but maybe lack a partner on the infrastructure side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's making a lot of sense. So how you guys? So that's sort of bootstrapping this on the, let's say, dApp side or use case side, right? Which of course is super important. What about on the solver side and on the validator side? Are those distinct sets in terms of Specular? Are those, are they common? Do people run both?
So, well, actually, some people we've talked to may run both. Validators, though, are relatively straightforward as we have them today. It's largely optimism validation. So, if a validators run OpStack, they should have no issues with participating as a validator there. Now we might actually optimize some things and push some additional consensus rules into validation, so it might be a little bit of a shift. But today, I mean, I've got validators reaching out who would love to work on things, and I'm happy to onboard validators. I think this is a core component. Now the hard thing here is solvers. Solvers are there's not a whole lot of them out there, and it's a real paradigm shift from the searcher builder paradigm, where we're looking for front running opportunities or sandwiching opportunities in that world. Now, I think the thing about solving is that it looks a heck of a lot like market making. Because solving is about fulfilling things in an incentive-aligned way, but the incentive for the solver is the arbitrage opportunities that are out there largely, which very much is a lot like the market makers' incentives. And so...
so you'll have to recruit these from an entirely different pool of people, right? If an entirely different pool of operators, like searchers and people who've participated in web markets, and convince them that this is a great thing to do. But the other thing it feels... that's very different from validation is they'll have to likely break their own code, right? I mean, you guys could have some open source implementation for some solvers, but by definition, that's not how a solver is going to make money, because they need to be better than the other solvers in the market, right?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, there's some cool little nuance. You don't have to necessarily be the best. You just have to provide the best answers. And you're never going to solve all given intents in a particular auction. In fact, you're probably not going to perfectly overlap with every other solver solution. So, you could have one trade that's just massively profitable that no one else got, that relatively massively profitable. I mean, it's an arbitrage opportunity, but
so you've alluded to this several times, that the partial intents and auctions. So is Specular also providing a service of breaking up like complex intent that I might have, as in I have Ethereum on the L1 and I would like to have USDC on Solana, right? Does Specular have some sort of like a divide and conquer strategy where it splits this into several intents, publishes those, and then specialized solvers can come in and sort of fulfill these things? Is that something you handle on chain? If I write a dApp like this and I say this is 3 intents, then you guys will handle the sort of disassembly and assembly back into the fulfillment?
Well, the solvers will. That's for sure. Now, I want to be careful here. Solana is not within our target set right now. If we're going to go to other L1s, I'd probably actually target Bitcoin first, but that's besides the point. Right now, we're focused on L2s and L1. To the pattern, let's just say we instead of Solana, Arbitrum, I wanted USDC on Arbitrum. Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do here, is actually make this relatively seamless. And some of the people who are approaching this from a wallet pattern, I mean, I think the wallet is kind of key to this, and what it allows in terms of user presentation here is, now if I can do this, if I can just say I've got Ethereum on L1 and I've got USDC on Arbitrum, or I swap for that, why does it matter where it is? Which is a really great feature. Now, that isn't to say that the security of Arbitrum isn't important, or the security of another rollup isn't important, but that now that I can fulfill order flow or have order flow fulfilled on my behalf to kind of obviate where it is, I can just say what I want and have it done. So it could be more like I just want USDC and I don't even care where it is. Now,
That's I feel that's really going to be an interesting space, because imagine
Yeah.
like you know, it's cheaper for me as a solver to put this on an optimistic rollup, where it's going to take me a week to get it out, but the solver, that's an externality for the solver. Solver doesn't care, right? It's fulfilled order, but there's no way for me to specify like a security or like a withdrawal quality requirement in the intent, right? So that's going to be some of the very interesting nuance that's going to come out when you like really hit those examples. Right?
Yeah, well, you brought up on a really interesting point here is we don't need to wait for bridge finality anymore, largely, because if the solver has liquidity in both places, they can solve directly and you will walk away with the funds that you wanted immediately. So this solves for bridging, but also backing up. While I said, like, you know, it's not going to matter where things are, this is one of the cool second order effects that I like really love about intents is that it will serve as a forcing function for the security of other rollups. The reason being is that users are not necessarily exposed to those details. They might not even be able to make heads or tails of what is important or what is secure. But the solver marketplace can, and they will price that into
Highly
the solution.
sophisticated, right?
And so, you know, this will the variations in pricing that you get, like let's say it's really crappy roll up that has no security and a USDC there and a USDC on Arbitrum, like, you know, the Arbitrum USDC is going to be worth more because there's a lot more trust in it. There's a lot more known security there than something that might not even have validation in place. So.
Absolutely, that makes sense. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this sort of investigation and this analysis of, you know, what's the real meat behind intents on how a user is going to interact with them, and what they will want, don't want, right? What they're willing to abstract away from. I mean, this is all the exciting space that you guys get to do. So this sounds like a great place to sort of end the podcast. So thanks very much for coming on and explaining, you know, Specular to us.
Well, thank you, Martin. It was a pleasure talking with you today, and I look forward to catching up with you hopefully in the future here and letting you know how things have gone.
Perfect.